On the storm-racked mining moon of Pharaon 9, where rust-red dust storms carved scars into steel structures, and the sky burned with constant lightning, a lone predator escape pod tore through the atmosphere like a meteor, spiraling, burning, screaming against gravity, until it slammed into the jagged ridges near Mining Sector Delta, its hull splitting open with a shriek of metal and plasma as a small, frail predator cub tumbled out, coughing blood, his breathing ragged, his mask shattered, broken lenses flickering, tubes leaking, processors sparking, and every breath tore into his weakened lungs like fire, for the atmosphere of Pharaon 9 was filled with metallic dust that clogged airways of any species without filtration. The cub clawed at the ground, pupils shrinking, terrified, his tiny mandibles trembling as his vision blurred, and he realized with dread that he would suffocate long before help arrived, alone, hurt, dying on a world he had never even seen on a star map. But fate intervened in the form of a 17-year-old human girl named Lyra Hale, a miner's daughter who worked double shifts to support her little brother, her hands calloused from hauling ore and repairing machinery, her mind sharp from years of fixing life support systems in the deadliest conditions. And as she walked home from her shift with a toolbox slung over her shoulder, the ground shook beneath her feet, dust rising, wind screaming, and she spotted the smoking crater, curiosity pulling her close until she saw him, a predator cub no older than 8 in human years, armor cracked, flesh torn, mask shattered, choking as he desperately tried to breathe. Fear flashed across her mind. Every story humans knew about predators warned of claws, fangs, hunters who saw humans as prey. But Lyra saw something else in the cub's glassy eyes: desperation, terror, the universal look of a child dying alone. And without hesitation, she ran to him, sliding to her knees, pulling tools from her belt as the cub instinctively tried to weakly swipe at her, but collapsed mid-motion, his arm falling limp against her leg. Lyra whispered softly, "Easy, I'm not here to hurt you," even though her voice shook from adrenaline. And with trembling but determined hands, she examined his shattered mask, realizing instantly that his species' respiratory system required specialized filtration. Then, with the raw ingenuity of a miner raised around failing equipment, she grabbed her spare oxygen filters, cracked them open, rewired patch cables with her teeth, and fused them to parts of his broken mask using a portable arc welder, sparks sputtering inches from the cub's face as she built a hybrid breathing device on the fly, a miracle of scrap engineering. The cub stared at her through dimming vision, confusion, and terror, mixing with awe as she slid the reconstructed mask over his face and hit the manual pressure regulator. There was a click, followed by a rush of purified air, and the cub gasped violently, claws digging into the ground as oxygen flooded his starving lungs. The sound of air hissing through the repaired mask echoed like life itself. His pupils widened, breath stabilized, and his trembling finally stilled, as Lyra pulled him gently into a sitting position, checking his wounds, pressing a hand to his chest to steady him, whispering encouragement with the bravery only humans seemed capable of. For the next hour, she dragged him, half-conscious and bleeding, back to the abandoned maintenance shelter she used during storms, patching his wounds with med gel she salvaged from company supplies, cleaning his cuts, speaking softly, even though she wasn't sure he understood. But he did. Predator cubs understood tone, intent, heartbeat rhythms, and every sound from Lyra radiated compassion, the kind of protection he had only ever received from his mother before her death. As lightning split the sky outside, the cub curled closer, clinging weakly to her sleeve, terrified but trusting her in a way that defied the violent culture he came from. Meanwhile, in orbit, a Predator dropship detected the cub's escape pod distress beacon, and a team of elite warriors prepared for retrieval, expecting to find a corpse, because no Predator cub could survive Pharaon 9's atmosphere with a broken mask. But what they would soon discover would rewrite their understanding of humanity. For Lyra Hale, a simple miner girl with nothing but scraps, courage, and fierce compassion, had done the impossible. She saved the heir of a predator bloodline with nothing but tools, instincts, and a heart strong enough to defy an alien death. The next morning, as Pharaon 9's twin sons rose through a haze of metallic dust, Lyra awoke to a strange clicking sound and found the cub crouched beside her makeshift furnace, staring at her with cautious curiosity, his broken mask still patched with her salvaged filters, breathing steady now, his large amber eyes reflecting the ember's glow. He chirped a soft, hesitant sound, one that predators reserve for trust, and Lyra smiled despite her exhaustion, handing him a canteen of purified water, which he accepted awkwardly, mandibles twitching in gratitude. But their fragile peace shattered when the sky roared and a massive predator warship descended through the clouds, its engines shaking the entire mining sector, kicking up whirlwinds of dust that hammered against the shelter's rusted walls. Lyra felt panic grip her chest. The stories said predators killed any human who interfered with their kind, but the cub suddenly pressed himself against her side, trembling, clutching her wrist tightly with surprising strength, as if begging her not to leave him, not to let them take him. And outside, towering figures emerged from the dropship, armored in obsidian plating, carrying plasma spears and hunter's gauntlets, scanning the crater, tracking footprints, moving with lethal precision until they reached the old shelter's entrance, weapons raised, expecting danger, only to freeze when they saw Lyra kneeling protectively in front of their cub, arms spread wide, shielding him with her own body, a gesture so recklessly brave and so impossibly human, it made even the battle-hardened warriors hesitate. One elder growled in disbelief. "The air here kills him, yet he lives. How?" And Lyra, terrified but defiant, lightly touched the cub's repaired mask and said, voice steady despite her fear, "Because I fixed it. Because he needed help." The warriors stared at the hybrid mask, cobbled together from human mining filters, broken predator tech, wires wrapped with electrical tape, and something like shame flickered across their mandibles. Because they had assumed the cub was doomed, yet this small human girl had accomplished what their own warriors would not. She risked her life to save him. They ordered her to step aside, but the cub snarled and wrapped his arms around her, refusing to be taken, pressing his face into her shoulder with a desperate whimper that silenced the entire squad. No predator cub had ever shown such attachment to an outsider, let alone to prey species. But Lyra rested a gentle hand on his head and whispered, "It's okay. I'm not letting them hurt you." And the warriors exchanged glances filled with confusion, irritation, and grudging respect. Their leader approached slowly, lowering his weapon in a rare gesture of honor, and asked the cub in their harsh native tongue if he truly chose the human. The cub looked up at Lyra, then back at the warriors, and struck his chest with a trembling fist, the gesture of a warrior's vow, before pointing at her, clicking the declaration, "My protector, my maker of air, my first clan." Shock rippled through the warriors. This cub, a royal blood child, had just invoked ancient law. A predator may choose their first clan, and whomever they choose is under the protection of their entire lineage. The elder turned to Lyra, bowed his head, a gesture no human had ever seen, and said, "You saved our blood. You are owed a life debt." But Lyra shook her head, saying softly, "I didn't save him for a reward. I saved him because he was dying." And the warriors felt something shift inside them, a realization that humans were not prey, not weak, not disposable. They were something rare, something dangerous, something honorable. But when the warriors moved to take the cub, he clung tighter to Lyra, hissing and snarling until she gently placed a hand over his heart and whispered, "It's okay. You'll be safe. I promise. And I'll see you again." She didn't know if it was true, but the cub believed her, and with one final trembling chirp, he allowed the warriors to lift him, still reaching toward her with small claws as the ship's engines roared to life. Minutes before the hatch closed, the cub grabbed the elder's wrist, pointed at Lyra, and declared, "She fixed what you could not. Honor her." And so before leaving Pharaon 9, the predator warrior placed at Lyra's feet a ceremonial gauntlet, something no human had ever been given, and spoke the words etched into predator history. "You saved one of ours with only scraps, courage, and compassion. The cub chooses you, and so we honor you. As the dropship ascended into the burning sky, the cub pressed his hand against the window, watching her shrink into the storm-blown landscape, vowing that one day he would return, not as a helpless cub, but as a warrior shaped by human courage. The mining moon never forgot the night the sky tore open a second time, not with fire or falling debris as before, but with the trembling roar of a predator dreadnought descending so low that its engines shook the stone spires like frightened bones. Inside the small medbay carved into the rock, the human girl Lyra stood between the cub and the incoming storm, knowing deep in her bones that the clan entering this world was not like the small scout pair that had appeared earlier. They were warriors, nobles, hunters of legend, and they had come not simply to retrieve a missing child, but to reclaim honor, avenge humiliation, and confront anyone who dared touch their bloodline. The cub, Karoo, still weak but breathing steadily behind the repaired mask Lyra had assembled from scrap filters and scavenged seals, clung to her leg with a trembling grip, not from fear of his people, but from fear of losing her, the only living being who had kneeled beside him when he was choking on broken air, and who had chosen to save him without knowing his name, his rank, or the danger she was inviting onto herself. And as the dreadnought landed, sending a storm of dust spiraling through the air like a rising ghost, Lyra straightened her back, placed one hand over the cub's shoulder, and whispered that everything would be fine, even though her heart hammered so violently she thought her ribs might crack, because she could feel a truth growing inside her. Whatever happened next, she would not step aside and let anyone, not even his own people, take him away without his voice being heard. The dreadnought opened like a metal maw, and from it stepped not soldiers, but an entire honor guard covered in bone-plated armor, their helmets carved with scars of centuries. At the center stood the matriarch of the Blood Clan, a towering figure draped in ceremonial hides, whose mask displayed golden tusk engravings reserved only for the bloodline of rulers. She descended the ramp slowly, like a mountain choosing to move, and when her eyes fell upon Lyra and the cub, her posture froze, not in anger, but in something more complicated, something wounded and ancient, because Karoo was not merely a cub, but her last living descendant after a massacre that had shattered half of her bloodline during a border war. The matriarch strode forward and the guards flared out like wings, but the cub rushed in front of Lyra, arms wide, trembling yet determined, and let out a protective hiss that echoed across the landing bay, a sound so small yet so powerful that even the matriarch paused. She leaned closer, studying his repaired breathing mask, the filters mismatched but functional, the straps made from repurposed mining harnesses, the materials cheap, human, pathetic by predator standards, yet the work was brilliant, alive, carefully crafted by hands that had not been trained for this, but had tried anyway because compassion does not need training. The matriarch lowered herself to the cub's height, her vast armor groaning, and touched the mask gently with one claw, feeling how it kept his lungs open, how it held his life steady, and then rose again with a quiet realization rippling behind her eyes. Her cub lived because a human child refused to let him die. The guards finally stepped forward, demanding the cub return, demanding the human be removed, demanding the clan's honor be restored. But Karoo clung to Lyra, shaking his head violently, tapping his chest, tapping hers, showing them with small gestures what words could not convey. This is my protector, this is my kin, this is my heir. Lyra swallowed, stepping forward, even though she could feel every predator warrior staring at her like a threat. She spoke simply, no speeches, no pleas. He wasn't breathing, so I fixed it. The matriarch watched her in silence, then turned to her own warriors and uttered a single command that shook them to their cores: stand down. The guards froze mid-step, shocked into stillness, because no matriarch had ever ordered such a surrender posture for a human miner, and yet she walked past them, inspecting the ruined crash site, the scattered metal, the burned stone, and the blood marks where her cub had crawled for air. And when she returned to Lyra, her voice rumbled like thunder softened by rain as she admitted, without ever saying the words directly, that she owed the human a debt that could never be fully repaid. But honor demanded one thing: the cub must be returned, trained, prepared for the throne he one day might inherit. Yet as she reached to take him,
Karoo wailed in terror and buried himself against Lyra, his claws gripping her shirt, refusing to move. Embarrassment rippled through the warriors, but the matriarch saw something deeper. This was not disobedience, but loyalty, born not of fear, but love, a bond stronger than bloodline and forged in life-saving desperation. And then from across the landing site, the mining overseers arrived, armed, trembling, desperate to defend their worker and the child she had found. The air thickened with tension, two factions ready to clash, and Lyra knew that one wrong breath would turn this moon into a graveyard. So she stepped forward again, standing between both groups, holding the cub close yet fearless, and she spoke not like a child, but like a leader. "He doesn't have to choose between us, he can have both." The matriarch stared at her for a long, heavy moment, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Predators did not share bloodlines with outsiders, did not trust outsiders, did not allow outsiders near their heirs. But tradition had not kept her bloodline alive. Kindness had. In that moment, she made the most shocking decision in her clan's recorded history. She declared that the human would be honored as a mask-bearer, a guardian of the royal line, a role reserved for those who protected a cub's first breath. The guards gasped, the miners whispered, and Lyra felt the cub's small hand squeeze hers with fierce pride. The matriarch offered her a ceremonial talon etched with royal sigils, symbolizing her permission to visit the clan and maintain the cub's repaired mask, but Lyra shook her head, instead taking only the cub's hand because symbols did not matter. He did. And so the unthinkable happened. A predator dreadnought extended its boarding ramp not for warriors or nobles, but for a human miner girl and the cub who refused to leave her side. As she stepped aboard, the world seemed to shift around her, as if fate itself was bending to make room for something new and terrifying and beautiful, a future where a human child walked among predator royalty, not as prey, not as servant, but as the one who had saved their heir from death with nothing but scrap metal, stubborn hope, and a heart too brave for her age. And as the dreadnought lifted into the stars and the mining moon shrank beneath them, Karoo rested his head against her arm, breathing peacefully through the mask she had built, and Lyra whispered to him that no matter what waited in the vast empire beyond, he would never have to face it alone because she had already decided if the universe wanted them separated, it would have to fight her for him. And the universe had already lost once.